Welcome back to Cinema Flicks Music Picks. I'm Davey, your host with the most, the beast with the least. The albums that were in the year that was 2022. Joint number 6, Arcade Fire's 6th album. We. Being French Canadian, you'd think it could be we, but it's not. It's we. Or I think it's actually W-E because it's capitalised. So it's named after a Russian novel, dystopian, from the 1920s, because 1984 is not dystopian enough anymore, it's not dark enough, so you have to go to a Russian novel where every part of your life is planned by the machine, everything. You've got, imagine 1984 being happy-go-lucky compared to the world of We, the Russian novel, and that's kind of what inspired this album, so it's not a very happy one. So Win Butler and Regine, the two de facto leaders, with Win being the main front man and Regine being the front lady, husband and wife pairing of Arcade Fire, have always explored themes of oppression and self-doubt, but sometimes they did it in such a bombastic way that you didn't notice how dark the lyrics were. Sometimes it might be buried in one track on an album that's so upbeat that you didn't notice it. Their last album was like that people criticised for being too synth poppy and things. I liked it personally, but this is definitely their best album since The Suburbs, and maybe since Neon Babel. What it also is their more subdued album. Now, that doesn't mean that it's bare, stripped back, but if I had to make a comparison, and it's an apt one, I think, because he's on here. You know those Peter Gabriel albums like So Us Up, and how they were still wonderfully adventurous, even though they were pop music, but they still had great meaning. But they weren't as obviously progressive. I don't want to use that word because it's got connotations of his old band's Genesis, but they weren't as obviously avant-garde, put it that way, as Peter Gabriel 1, 2, 3, 4, the self-titled run, and that's kind of what this is. This is not as obviously upbeat as Neon Babel and Suburbs and even Funeral, but it does have moments, just like Peter Gabriel had moments. So there are still your Shock the Monkey equivalents and whatnot in here. But what also ties this into Arcade Fire's past, going right back to the first album, Funeral, is that it's very concepty, and I don't just mean in terms of the themes that I discussed there about dystopianism and isolation, self-worth, and wanting to break out of the machine. I mean literally, in terms of being a concept album, this is 1, 2, 3, 4 songs and then the title track, but they're broken down into parts. So there's like part 1, part 2, part 1, 2, 3, 4, part 1, part 2, part 1, part 2, title track. So you get loads of different. So you'll get End of the Empire 1, End of the Empire 2, End of the Empire 3, and they've all got subtitles. So it's very much like their early stuff, and they used to do that kind of thing as well. And also that goes back to a lot of prog rock epics where they would kind of break it up into little sections as well and tell you, skip to here if you only want to hear John Anderson going, I get up, I get down. First of all, how glorious is that package? I wish I'd bought this in vinyl now. Might still go back and get it, but that's just, that looks like I've got a golden ticket. And even though you don't get obviously the glory of a massive size that way in terms of vinyl, you still get the goodies included that came with the vinyl. So you get the I unsubscribe sticker, which ties in thematically to this, and then you get a set of Polaroids that sum up each track which is really cool. So Age of Anxiety 1, Age of Anxiety 2, which is Rabbit Hole, which is great. That's one of the best tracks on the album. End of the Empire 1, I won't go through them all. I'm High on Capitalism. Just see if there's anyone that particularly. The Lightning 2. But they're all very homespun. You know, there's nothing too professional about these. That's what I kind of like about it too. And then you get a few at the back that are just disconnected. Well, We Love You. And whoops. AF for Arcade Fire. And did I drop one? Excuse me. I did. I See You. They've turned into Prince. Like I See You. You know, I think that's fair enough for an eyeball that size. I don't know if you got a glimpse there, but what's cool about these is this is actually a lyrics book as well. Because when you turn over, you get the lyrics to that track. Really cool. That's really cool. I salute you, Arcade Fire. That's a brilliant concept. And it is a lyrically very dense album. When Butler goes into a lot of themes, I mean, the Age of Anxiety, I mean, it starts with, it's the age of doubt, and I doubt we'll figure it out. Is it you or is it me? The Age of Anxiety. Fight the fever with TV, and the age where nobody sleeps, and the pills do nothing for me, and the Age of Anxiety. When I look at you, I see what you want me to. When you look at me, see what I want you to see. What I want you to see, and the Age of Anxiety. There's a lot of stuff in here about how you can't medicate your way out of these kind of troubles, that the world's just too dark a place for that. There's a lot of ruminations on war, on intolerance. End of the Empire, the big 4-track epic, is literally about the decline of America itself. And a bit like Neil Young explored themes in the 70s, and so did Warren Zevon in some of his tracks. They wonder if it may not be the worst thing in the world to see America go. Only Canadian band could get away with that. But yeah, Last Dance. One Last Dance here at the end of the Empire makes me cry. Watching the moon on the ocean where California used to be. It's not half bad. Spending half your life being sad. That's a brilliant lyric. End of the Empire 2, Last Round. And we know it's time to go. Heard the news on the radio. One last round before we go through the pale atmospheric glow. Leave the light on. Didn't used to get high, didn't used to drink, and I didn't used to think that I could ever dream about losing you. Just everything on here is just Sagittarius A, which is one of the really cool stompers. This is actually the most fun track on an album that's not fun in places. And that sticker, I unsubscribe, there's a lyric in here, we unsubscribe, and then Regine comes in and they both shout, fuck season 5! And anyway, the clothes don't fit me right, must be the wrong body type. And the space where they say heaven has gone away, Sagittarius say, we'll see one day what's on the other side. It's lyrically dense and well worth exploring, so I'm really glad they included the lyrics. It's musically quite fascinating for Arcade Fire because it's at once their most lush album, but also their most stripped down. So you don't get the bombast of all the unusual instruments that you did on, say, Neon Babel. But what you do get is still beautiful arrangements. Nigel Godrich of Radiohead fame, Paul McCartney fame, Smell, who I've reviewed last week, he produces, and so you obviously get a supreme producer in charge, and everything just sounds lush. It's the best word for it. When there's string parts, some horn parts, it just sounds absolutely breathtaking, but without being old school Arcade Fire, where they would throw in like a hurdy-gurdy or some obscure Eastern European instrument and all that kind of stuff. There's no, I don't want to call that a gimmick, but there's no gimmickry going on here. It's very much no, we don't want to distract from the message here. This is a statement album more than any they've ever made, really. There's piano balladry from Wim, and he gives it his all vocally. I think I like Wim's voice now because it's becoming more smoky, mature. He couldn't come up with a keep the cars running and no cars go kind of thing now. It's just not where his voice is at these days. But it's great to hear him doing these kind of Scott Walker-like ballad parts. Regine doesn't sound like she's aged at all in 20 years since their debut. Well, 19 years, but the EP came out the year before, didn't it? Just self-titled. Yeah, it's one of these albums that's kind of, even though I've talked for 11 minutes, it's very hard to actually describe. It's not like the other day where I can just sing you a few hooks. And I don't even think it would benefit from me saying I'll stick a track down, because it's a piece. It is one piece. It's not designed to be listened to as a track. It's not designed to be, here's the hit single. There's nothing like that here. There's not even a, if it was, we'll go back to the Peter Gabriel analogy. If it was Peter Gabriel's first solo album, there isn't a Salisbury Hill you can pluck and make a hit out of that. Nothing on here stands alone and works perfectly. It needs to be heard in the context of everything around it. So it's an album, a real album for that very reason. And long may they run, because I've been with Arcade Fire since the start, and even though some of their albums are better than others, I've never ever felt let down by them. Even if they do something that's different, I always appreciate them trying something new. So hey, yeah, so I'd recommend you, if you've checked out an Arcade Fire maybe and you haven't listened since, say, the Suburbs and you didn't like the last few, come back and give this a go. It's their deepest, it's their most involved, personal, darkest, moodiest, broodiest album. I'd probably have a Prozac handy if you do, though. It's not the most upbeat, although there are a few moments of EDM on here, electronic dance music. There's a few moments of cool synth stuff, which are almost danceable, but it's almost to parody the message, or to say this is what they want you to feel, but we know behind the happiness is this. Yeah, it's like a lot of these albums that have been released in 2022, a state of the world album, because, well, I had plenty of time to take stock, didn't we, during lockdown. So great writers like Win and Regine are no exception. So, and Will Butler unfortunately left the band just after this came out, and I miss Will. I hate it when one of your old faves leaves a band, but we'll see you hopefully in a good solo career, Will. Anyways, 13 minutes about an album I said was going to be really difficult to talk about. Oh yeah, and if I did mention Peter Gabriel was on it, he's on Unconditional, sounding great. And that's cool too, because if you remember, Peter Gabriel covered Arcade Fire's My Body is a Cage from Neon Babel, which, if you haven't heard Peter Gabriel's version of that, hear Peter Gabriel's version of that. But yeah, 40 minutes long, so it's not actually the longest album. So I'd give this a spin. 40 minutes of your time, what have you got to lose? Well, 40 minutes, I suppose. But hey, yeah. So I'm covering this first in this week's, I take these in a big bundle usually, and I'm covering this first this week because it was one of the ones I thought, it's so dense that if I do this last, I'll be like, what is that? What can I possibly say about that again? What was all that? So yeah. Anyways, stay very safe out there. It's a wee world. However, love and mercy at the end of the day, and hopefully we come through the other side. Take it easy.